Okay, so we got the taps in from Horizon Hobby. I got the rest of the slider pieces attached or tapped, and you can see one of the holes is off right here a little bit. It's a little low, so what we have to do is open up this track right here, and we're going to do that with a small file. Stick it in there and run it back and forth until that track runs freely with the bolts. So we pulled the slider out for the front, and we're just going to open up the bottom of this track a little bit here. And we're going to keep doing that and test fitting it until we get it moving freely with the bolts inside the slider piece. Okay, so now you can see we have the slider in with the canopy bolts in there, and it's sliding nice and free. There's a little bit of resistance, but there's not enough to worry about anymore. So next step is to dry fit the canopy, and then we have to make the rail mounts. Okay, so here you can see we have the canopy, the front slider temporarily mounted onto the fuselage, and we can see how it works when you actuate it through the push rods in the front of the fuselage. It's not bad. It needs to be smoothed up a little bit, but that's not a big deal. So what we'll do now is we'll actually make the pieces that go in here that will slip through and compress up against the aluminum slider bar, so that the canopy stands off from the fuselage a little bit, so there's no rubbing. So we get a nice smooth actuation when it's run with the Ziroli actuator. Okay, so how we're going to make the compression pieces that go on the slider, we're going to use this angle iron right here. We're going to measure the canopy on it, mark it off, and cut it to the exact length of the Texan area. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take the Dremel and we're going to slice off this part so that there's just a piece sticking out here, and then we'll notch it in the 3 spots for the 3 holes so the bolts can run through there, and then we'll trim off this edge right here so that it sits evenly onto the canopy, so that it doesn't go up into the glass area past the frame. So you'll understand more once I get it finished. Okay, so here you can see we cut the angle iron with the Dremel and the cutoff wheel so that it's the same, just a little shorter than the length of the Texan on the canopy. And what we're going to do now is we're actually going to cut this edge off right here along that line. I don't know if you can see it real well. Along that line with the Dremel tool. And what that'll do is that'll leave a profile of the edge of this with just a little bit sticking out, and that will stick in between the rail slots into here and push up against the aluminum sliders so that the canopy does not bind itself on the rails. So I'll go ahead and cut that off, and I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, so you can see where we went through and we cut the tab off of that, the end off of that piece of angle iron. Here it is right here. Okay, you can save those pieces and you can use them for metal shims when you get your windshield attached, or toss them out. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and take a file and clean this edge up here. You can see how there's some burrs on there from cutting it with the Dremel tool. We'll get that cleaned up and flattened out nice and smooth, and then we'll mark where the bolt holes are on it. And what we'll do is we'll get those bolt holes marked in there, and then we'll just cut into that so that the center of the bolt will go right through where the center of the angle is on the angle iron, and then that way we'll be able to push right up against the aluminum sliders on the inside of the tracks, and then the canopy will actually get mounted to this. And what I usually do is I'll glue it in first, make sure that it works, everything's in a good spot, and then I'll drill a couple extra holes and put two more bolts in through it to make sure that the canopy is firmly attached to it. Okay, here's the completed piece. You can see that this end of it here was shaved down to match the canopy frame that's molded into the canopy. We have the lip cut down, and that'll slip inside the groove for the track. the rails, and these holes here are the ones so that the bolts can go through, so that grips into, they get tight against the aluminum sliders inside the railing. So this one's finished. We're going to go ahead and glue this one in place, and we'll start doing the next one. And when I get ready to fit the canopy on, I'll be back. So here you can see we have the sliders in. They're bolted in right here, and you can see the actuations. Fairly smooth on here. A couple things I want to point out to you though. Notice the windshield is still taped on. It is not bolted on yet because we're going to do a final fit after we get everything put together. Even though it looks good right now, we're just going to wait until we get everything put together and lined up before we bolt that windshield on to make sure it lines up nicely. Now the trick with these bolts right here is not to tighten them up all the way. If you tighten them up all the way, you'll suck the canopy down into the rail and you'll bind it up. So what I do is I leave those a little bit loose. I tighten them in and I back them off until I get nice smooth movement on the canopy like this. And then when we do final assembly, we'll use some permanent Loctite on, or some blue Loctite on there, so that these don't come back out. Now you can see, even though the bolts aren't super tight, the canopy won't come off. Okay. And the last thing we're going to have to do is to make the pieces that go on the outside here, so that we're not just lifting, we're not holding it on with just the plastic or the canopy right here. So we'll actually have a metal piece made with 3 holes here, and then it'll bolt on into the aluminum right there, and that'll be what holds everything together while it's flying.